But the Mexican government has stepped up their game, and they are doing a really good job dealing with some pretty dangerous people, actually, to protect these forests, the forests that remain. So just to show some deforestation on that one slope right there, you may or may not be able to see it because of the screen. Just keep in mind that whenever they log these trees, some people might say that, well, the trees are going to grow back. It's a renewable resource, and then the butterflies can come back to it again. Well, here's the problem. In order for that microclimate to form in those trees, you need forests that are hundreds of years old that create that microhabitat. And monarch butterflies don't have hundreds of years to wait for these trees to reestablish. The threat is now. And so we have to protect these remaining forests that are there. Now, there are many more threats north of the border in the United States. And one of the obvious ones to all of us in this room is going to be habitat loss through development for housing, industry, or agriculture. So this is a lot that was posted for sale for commercial development, and there is a large Asclepias humistrata sandhill milkweed covered in viable fruit growing right at the base of it. And so, who in here knows what Biden's alba is? Beggar ticks. The annoying, frustrating white flower that pops up in your yard and leaves little achene seeds all over your body, okay? We shouldn't call these milkweeds, okay? Because Biden's alba, although a very important native wildflower, is a pretty weedy species where its seeds seemingly germinate in air. I found one that had germinated in a sock once and was growing it. And so that's pretty hardcore. So monarchs don't do that. Monarchs are not weeds. They are super long-lived perennial species where they can indefinitely live, 60 years, 120 years. A lot of the anecdotal information shows that they just keep coming back year after year, decade after decade, and they can have tap roots in the ground that are 6 to 8 feet deep. So they're super long-lived species with extremely low reproductive output. So if you go in here and scrape away a lot with milkweeds in it, it is not likely to recover on its own along the periphery of that. And even if they do, the requirements for germination and establishment are complicated. And yet there's still an easy fix for it. So another threat is OE, and this is a controversial one that some of us know about, some of us don't. OE, which is an abbreviation for a little protozoan organism called Ophriocistis electroscura. It's a little organism that can cause really high mortality rates in monarch butterflies, particularly migrating monarch butterflies. Sometimes the caterpillars will just keel over like that. Often the chrysalis will just turn black. If you don't see any orange wrapped up in the chrysalis, it often indicates that the monarch has aborted and is not going to survive. If they do survive and emerge, often you can look at the abdomen. And if you see along the abdomen that that relatively contiguous white line is kind of spotty and doesn't look very good, such as in that bottom photograph, that's a good indication that it has OE. But probably one of the biggest indications of OE is size. And so they're typically much smaller because their bodies are under huge stress from this really large protozoan burden that they're bearing. And so we always find lots of OE-infected butterflies mixed in with the other butterflies at the coast. None of them that we have tagged have ever been recorded elsewhere. It is not thought that they survive because they have much lower vigor and probably can't handle dealing with the adverse conditions that they have to endure all the way, 4,000 miles in some cases. So probably the biggest, single most overwhelming issue that has caused a large decline in monarch butterflies can generally be referred to as the GMO transition that unofficially began in 1996. Around that time, Roundup-ready crops were introduced to farmers across the United States and around the world. So these GMOs were able to be planted, and they were able to douse them with herbicide to remove all of the weedy plants that were popping up in there and competing with the crops. As a result of this, farmers were able to maximize, well, I won't say maximize, but increase their production. And in the process, they eliminated a tremendous amount of milkweeds that up until that point were controlled by tilling to knock them back once per year, and they usually would not conflict with the crop. But when this happened, scenes like this, where the edge of that cornfield is essentially a monoculture of thousands of milkweeds, that roadside is full of hundreds of milkweeds, that essentially disappeared, and in many regions across the United States, this is what you have now. You have a plant here, you have a plant there, and so there just is no food for these monarchs to lay their eggs on across a very, very large area. Very, very large area of the United States. And so a lot of research, and this is published, this is on various websites, says that all in all, in about 20 years, because of the GMO transition, close to 170 million acres of milkweed habitat has vanished in the United States as a result of the conversion to Roundup Ready crops. And so that's huge. Obviously, that's why their numbers have gone down, among other confounding factors. So the government said, well, we have this petition. What would we have to do right now to arrest that decline from getting worse? And they played around with some statistics and other things and determined that we would need to restore 200,000 acres of milkweed habitat per year and pump out about 1 billion milkweed seedlings per year to stop the milkweed decline from going in a continuously bad direction. And so here in the southeastern United States, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service based at St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge took charge with figuring out how we can address how we can make more milkweeds and help the monarch out here in the southeast. And so, so we're about 5 years deep into this research, figuring out what's going on with milkweeds here in Florida in particular and in surrounding states. What's the status of these milkweeds? And we've worked to figure out how to manage them, improve them, increase their numbers. And so here are some of our findings, the ones that are going to be the most important for you all to know about in this room from what we have uncovered with this very successful project. So first and foremost, when this project began, we said, well, where are they? No one really tracks milkweeds because for the most part, except for a few species, they're not listed. If a species is not listed as endangered or threatened, or a species of special concern, agencies are not required to survey or map them, so they don't. So no one knew where they were at. So using a combination of historical narratives and herbarium voucher data and aerial photography, we began the hunt. And it got easier and easier and easier with time because we were able to predict patterns in the landscape that would suggest that these plants were still there. And so we began to find a lot of plants, usually in relatively small areas. But one recurring theme that once we did the math showed up, it really startled us. And that was the fact that altogether, over 94% of our milkweed findings that we have uncovered thus far are obligated to the sides of roads. And in this case, in this photograph, I spent an entire day with a crew of people transecting back and forth across those roads through that intact ecosystem, which this is inside of protected public land. And every single milkweed occurrence that we found was in the human footprint of the landscape and not in the woods. So why are the milkweeds not in the woods and are bottlenecking along the sides of these roads, or in many cases in the middle of the road? And so some people initially said that, well, maybe the landscape was impacted and these are just relics right here where maybe there was less impact up against the road or something like that. Maybe in some cases that's accurate, but in a number of cases that was not the case, especially when we went back to places where milkweeds were known and they were gone from land that had been protected for 100 years. So for example, here we are on a dirt road in the backcountry of a protected land, and we could not find a milkweed anywhere in this place except for in the middle of dirt roads. That's where we kept finding them. In the most disturbed, unlikely area of this protected area, they were in the road. And so a student that worked under me at FSU went ahead and walked all over these roads, drove around, and applied some field methods standards that we use to determine where plants are at and where they're not, and basically demonstrated and quantified that milkweeds were occurring rather in roads or along the side of the road. In the very second that you left the road and entered the woods, the milkweed populations dropped off. They disappeared. They weren't there anymore. And so it was very, very compelling to see that even on protected land set aside for these things, the plants were vanishing very quickly. And so there's a milkweed in that red circle. And then on the left is an area that's burned every 2 years or so. And then the area on the right is burned every 5 years or so. So in both cases, the only aspect of the landscape that comes close to matching what used to happen in this photograph is actually the road, and not what you're seeing on either side of the road. And this is an issue that's facing virtually every public land in the state of Florida right now, and we're paying the price for not burning the landscape correctly for many decades. And so to further justify or demonstrate how bad this is, I spent a year surveying St. Mark's looking for a milkweed that up until the 1930s was demonstrated to be very common and ubiquitous. And I gave up. I couldn't find it anymore until one day I was riding my motorcycle by and something occurred to me. I realized that we had these little experimental plots out in here that had been burned consistently every 2 years for a long time. And so I walked out there and walked into the plots and walked right up on those milkweeds, the last stronghold of them in St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge, in these plots where fire has been applied on 2-year growing season intervals. And so to further illuminate to you, whenever you're looking at Google Maps and you're in the woods or you're along roadsides, how different this landscape has changed. I love using this because that pond, that circular pond that has a cypress tree growing right in the middle of it, that cypress tree still exists today. This is a 1952 aerial photograph along what will become US 98 in Wakulla County. So all of that white that you see through this area right here, this is an open savanna. This is a pine savanna with a low density of longleaf pine growing through it. And the only way that was kept open was by fire sweeping through and maintaining it as a savanna. Well, fire suppression and lots of other things have happened since then. And so today, this is what you're looking at. There's that same cypress tree, and there is no more open savanna there except for that power line cut and the roadside up there. And so upon going and investigating this site among with hundreds of others, this is what you find. The milkweeds are bottlenecking along the side of the road, and the only aspect that remains that comes close to what they used to have. And what's keeping that open? It's mowers, lawn mowers, tractor mowers. Tractor mowers are the only thing that are keeping the roadsides open enough to keep these plants from disappearing. And so that's why we are dealing with roadside bottlenecks right now, because of a long history of fire suppression. Those are baby milkweed seedlings that I found in an area that had just recently burned. Milkweed seeds, once they germinate, usually require 2 to 5 years to reach sexual maturity, which means that the habitat has to be maintained during that time period in order for them to reach maturity. So if you don't maintain it, they disappear, they don't survive. In addition to that, if you don't keep the landscape open with prescribed burning, the adults, they don't flower, they don't produce fruit, and they eventually die. For any of you that are not aware of the science, a lady named Jean Huffman came down into Central Florida and to parts of North Florida and looked for tree stumps, old tree stumps for pine trees. She cut tree cookies, I call them cookies, these cross sections of the base of the tree to look at the tree rings. And when she looked at the tree rings, she saw that there were burn scars all over the place in these tree rings. Well, they weren't just random. She went ahead and counted them up for all of these tree rings and was able to determine, after looking at thousands of them, that fire returned to the landscape in Florida on average every 2 years between May and September, with very little variability in that. Lightning-derived fire came back and maintained this landscape. And so here are 3 species of milkweed. This is Bomboyette Preserve, that's in Hillsborough County. There are 3 species of milkweed, and after transecting all day, they're all found on dirt roads. They're not in any of those natural communities, and so because they have not been burned. And so if milkweeds are not there, what else is not there? It's a big question. And so this is what we're dealing with. Development and fire suppression. These plants are living in the last place left that they can and are extremely vulnerable. What if they widen the road? Okay? What if they decide that they want to herbicide instead of mowing, which is what's happening all over this region right now. The plants are gone and they're not coming back because there are no plants behind them in the woods. So that's where working with your county to implement reduced mowing, that's the one thing that is keeping these plants on the landscape all over the state. The Florida Wildflower Foundation and the Florida Native Plant Society have worked diligently to build relationships and MOUs with the state government, with FDOT, with FDEP, to sort of guide them in how they should manage these roadsides. So here is a roadside population of Asclepias perennis, aquatic milkweed. I found this station of them and realized they were being overmowed. So I worked with the county to implement a reduced mow schedule, and it's a good thing I did. And here's justification for why and how it's a success. There's the mow line, the reduced mow line. There are the milkweeds right to the left, and there's a monarch caterpillar right there that would have been lost had I not gone before them to do that. So this is a huge successful program that a lot of people are not aware of in the state, and they're also not aware that we can't do it all alone. So a lot of us need to pitch in and kind of work to do this in order to save all of these roadsides. So another thing to keep in mind that we uncovered is that the plants here, even if they look like plants that maybe you know from where you're from, if you're from up north, Michigan, New York, Rhode Island, whatever, a lot of people know pink swamp milkweed up there, but do you see how isolated those green counties are down there from all those green counties in the north? They're extremely genetically distinct from the plants up north, which is why if you buy pink swamp milkweed seeds from up north, they don't grow here because they are temperature zone 6, 5, or 4 ecotype. These are temperature zone 10 and 11 ecotypes that are adapted to the harsh summers. So lots of endemism with these species as well. So often we find populations of milkweeds where they're the last of their kind, and this region is included in that. We find out at the last minute. They're about to develop the site. Well, we don't have time to wait to collect seeds to maintain this genetic diversity, so we do frequently have to go in and we have to dig them all out. And it's usually a big deal. People say, well, it's not listed. What's the big deal? It has a huge distribution. It's found in like 50 counties in the state. Well, here's the problem. If you go and look at the vouchers, you can look up vouchers online, and it'll show a plant that's been put in a press with descriptions of where it came from. If you go and look up the vouchers for each of those counties, the vast majority of them are going to be labeled 1901, 1960. And if you look at aerial photographs now, you see a wonderful matrix of development and industry a majority of the time for a lot of these vouchers. And so they've been lost from a lot of their range, and so they're way more uncommon than people are aware of. So just keep in mind when you're looking up distribution maps, that distribution map does not necessarily mean they're found in all of those counties anymore. So that's why when we do find remnant populations of them, it is super important that we remove them, and we do. And it's a lot of fun, and it's rewarding to know that we're saving this genetic diversity. And we also have relied on that to experiment with a lot of these milkweeds to figure out how to grow them and produce them so that all of you in this room can have a larger availability of native milkweeds. Who in here is aware of how hard it is to find native milkweeds to put in your yard? Okay? All right. Well, I'm aware of that too. And so we've been working very hard to figure out how to do that. And we've developed methodologies for propagation and cultivation and germination for all of the species in Florida. So now we know how to grow all of them, and we are growing all of them, and working with the state's biggest native plant nurseries within FAN, the majority of them, to produce these plants.